Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Vermont Room. I'm David Briggs. I'm the innkeeper here. And I'd like to tell you a little bit about the Salon Series, why we do this. But first, keeping with the Coolidge mystique, I'd like to tell you one of our favorite Coolidge stories, which I learned from Dick. And this is not apocryphal, this is recorded. And it has to do at a time when Calvin Coolidge was the lieutenant governor of Massachusetts. And it made him, therefore, the president of the Massachusetts Senate. And it may strike you as really strange, but one party got mad at the other. And a Republican actually called across the chamber floor to his Democrat counterpoint and said, "Go to hell." The Democrat was shocked and rose and said, "Mr. President, might we have a ruling?" And Coolidge said, "You don't have to go." True story. That's what makes me so proud of our native son, Calvin Coolidge. The Coolidge Salon Series is, like many of the things we've done here in White River Junction, a labor of love. It doesn't happen until the spirit moves. And we've had just a notable list of performances. They're all very concise and special. More often than not, they have involved relationships. The first one out of the blocks was 4 female voices from Lebanon, New Hampshire, singing barbershop harmony in just the perfect way. But other ones included Davy Davis from Brownsville, West Windsor, with his brother Rick, a very special night. Nick Heil from Norwich with his daughter Nancy. That was really choice. And then one I'm so glad we worked it in before he passed, with Ed Eastridge and Ted Mortimer from Dr. Burma. It was Ed and Ted. So tonight's performance and offering is a very singular one in many, many ways, because there's only one Dick McCormack in this whole world. And Dick and I go back quite a ways, because one of the things that I instituted here in the early 90s was a program geared for what became known as cultural heritage tourism. And it was off a unique program that came out of the University of New Hampshire called Elder Hostel. Perhaps you've heard of Elder Hostel. They modernized it when we baby boomers became of age to calling it Rhodes Scholar. And now it has a big profile. But it was very humble beginnings, and it was intended to give educators affordable, cultural, continuing education travel. And so we signed up, and we actually produced the program here, not just hosted it. We fed them and lodged them here, but we actually did the program. So I became the self-ordained dean of Rhodes Scholar, or Elder Hostel, and we were the biggest producer of it in Vermont for 30 years. It brought quality people in from all over the place. And we used the White River and the Vermont stories to educate them and keep them engaged during the week. And people would come up to me and say, "The people in this town know what you're doing here?" I said, "No, you've been here for 5 nights. You know more about White River than most locals do." And on one occasion, we had an intergenerational program that was based on theater. And the kids and their grandparents came together, and they had to write a play and perform it by the end of the week. Oh, wow. Which meant going to listen to for props, and it was just a hoot. There was one particularly small group of grandparents and grandkids, only had one man in it. So I kept close to him and gave him some company during the week. His name was John. And you never know where these people come from. At the end of the week, I'm in the cast now up in the Briggs Opera House. We performed it on Thursday night and watched the videos on Friday morning as a farewell. And I said to him finally, after a week of rubbing elbows with him, I said, "John, what is it you do in real life?" And he said, "I'm the editor of the Wall Street Journal." So we brought people from all over. Most of our programs were closed by somebody notable, and that somebody notable was our good friend Dick McCormack. And so Dick and I have been in the trenches working forever. And this was in a time when we could get away with this kind of tension where I played the role as a Vermonter of being a Republican, and Dick is not. So without further ado, you kind of know what you're in for tonight. I think you're going to really enjoy it. Please welcome Dick McCormack.
Now let me see who's here. Now they said they were coming. First of all, I want to note the presence of Senator Becca White, my former student. I went home the first day of class and I said to my wife, Cindy, I said, I've got this girl in my class. She's a firecracker. So anyway, what I have in mind for you for the next hour and hour plus is I'd like to offer a presentation of songs that I have written over the last half century. I don't think I've ever actually done a concert of only my own songs. And I'm one of that generation of men who wanted to be the next Bob Dylan. And like for most of us, it didn't happen that way. And so I made my living as a musician for many years, but doing gigs. And that meant I did a lot of stuff because I never sold out. I never sucked up to the crowd. But I did try to take into account that they worked for a living and were coming to hear me play. So I wanted to think of stuff, follow the energy level in the room and stuff. But I'm very proud of the songs I've written. I must say, most of them I wrote years ago. One song is literally 55 years ago I wrote it, and I think it holds up. I have not written a lot of songs lately. I think the muse of song, who I think is named Cecilia, the ancient muse of song, prefers young people. And she dumped me years ago. Lately, she seems to have a special preference for young women. I've noticed. That's where the songs are coming from. Before I start, I do want to make a brief disclaimer, which is I do recognize that our nation is under attack from its own government, and that there's something a little bit awkward about doing anything other than resistance. So I hope I do not appear to be blasé about what's happening there. This is not a political performance. I actually went into politics when I got interested in politics. But on the other hand, everything is political in one way or another. I remember campaigning for office, and I would try to hand someone my literature, and they'd say, "Oh, I'm not political." And my answer was, that's actually not an option. Your choices are to be passively political or actively political. Knowingly political or ignorantly political, but everybody is, if you breathe, you're political. But other than that kind of a connection, that's not what this next hour plus is about. I'm going to start with a song I actually wrote on commission. Many years ago, the VNRC, Vermont Natural Resources Council, held an event to celebrate the 10th anniversary of Act 250. And that was a while ago. And they wanted me to write an environmental anthem. And I had a hard time getting it down. My first several efforts, I kind of threw out because they all had a kind of John Denver, goody two-shoes, happy backpacker feel to them. And actually, to be honest, I think even this song smacks a little bit of happy students in Lederhosen, romping through the Alps, Val d'Ari, Val d'Ara. I love this capo, but it does have one flaw. It doesn't like the bass. Talk about happy students in Lederhosen. This is an up-tempo waltz with a little catch. So the line is not one and all or one with the land. The line is one and all or one with the land. Kind of Strauss waltz catch there. We live in the ruts of the long glacial spring, the scars on the land that millennia bring, the tracks of a giant and wild ancient thing that make us all one with the land. One and all are one with the land. Our footpaths are humble, our mountains are grand. Each summer the wild berries bleed in our hands and christen us one with the land. Water that percolates, sparkling and cold. Water that splashes and water that rolls. Water that waters our bodies and souls and makes us all one with the land. The trees of our fires and walls have long stood in the depths and the darks and the smells of the woods to inform us some things are transcendently good and that we're all one with the land. One and all are one with the land. Our footpaths are humble, our mountains are grand. Each summer the wild berries bleed in our hands and christen us one with the land. Echoes of geese where the gaggles have flown, whitetails in families and wildcats alone, brothers and sisters in blood and in bone, and all of us one with the land. So parents, beware, our daughters and sons will live out their lives with what can't be undone. Benign or malignant, all we'll have done as one with the land. One and all are one with the land. Our footpaths are humble, our mountains are grand. Each summer the wild berries bleed in our hands and christen us one with the land. Thanks. Thank you. One of the guests at that celebration, that VNRC celebration, was Madeline Kunin. And that was actually when I met her, and when she met me and became familiar with my environmental values, on the basis of which she, a year or two later, appointed me to the District Environmental Commission. And my entire political career grew out of that. So I owe it all to Madeline Kunin and to that little song. My boy Noah was about 9 years old at the time. No, he was older than that. 12, I guess. And he was reading Shakespeare. And he said the line, water that waters our bodies and soul. He said, you use the same word as a noun and as a verb. He said, Shakespeare did that. So I think it's the only time I've ever been compared to Shakespeare. Anyway, what I want to do for you to start with are a bunch of Vermont songs. Then I'd like to do a whole other thing, a cycle of songs that I call Songs of Love and What Passes for It. And then, speaking of my son, and I have two sons. Between us, my bride and I have 6 grandchildren, 2 of whom are mine. So I'm going to do songs of family. But Vermont. My grandfather was born and raised in Bethel. And like many of his, and not his generation, like many of generations of Vermonters, he couldn't wait to get out. People say Vermont's losing all its young people. Young people have been moving out of Vermont since they opened the Erie Canal. My grandfather moved to New York, which was where the bright lights were and the money. He never got rich. He was a high school teacher, but he did all right. And being a Vermonter, just having a steady income, he invested conservatively and cautiously. And so when he inherited the house he had grown up in, he kept it. He was able to keep it. And so I grew up in a family of summer people. We came up, as part of every summer, we'd come up to the Bethel house. Vermonters say summer people are crazy. They cook in the yard and crap in the house. We were summer people. I used to cry when we went home, and I knew I was going to live my life in Vermont. I happened to show up during the so-called Hippie Invasion, but that was just pure coincidence. I was 5 years old. I knew I was going to come here. Really. And I have noticed that real Vermonters, including the one to whom I'm married, they tend to call me a flatlander when they disagree with me. But I've had real Vermonters who know my biography, who will say, well, he's a flatlander. He's not like us, meaning the counting me in on it. So, I really love Vermont the way you love a person. Has a spirit. I tried to express that in a song that had the words, "These mountains know more than they tell, and more than you or I ever will. There's magic hiding underneath the country windowsill, and there's voices in the hills." I thought that's good lines. That's good line. I should make sure Noah hears that. My son. He may be compare me to Shakespeare. But the song fell flat. I wasn't able to finish the song. It just didn't go anywhere. About a year later, I wrote a song about a multi-generational Vermont family facing the dilemma, go broke from paying taxes or get rich from selling land. And I thought, that's a good song. It's sort of a country song feel to it. I thought, yeah, but it's just another song about the passing of the agricultural culture. For God's sake, we got enough of those. The song doesn't fly. And then I thought, I'm going to add a chorus. These mountains know more than they tell. And so if you ever write something and you think it failed, don't throw it out. These mountains know more than they tell. Yes, and more than you or I ever will. There's magic hiding underneath the country windowsill, and there are voices in the hills. My name is Gary Bartley. I was born here in the mountains. I've worked all of my adult life at the mill. My people have been farming here 7 generations. Now my brother Wayne is the only one who's farming still. The oldest tombstone in the graveyard stands over my forebear. There are hills and roads and creeks around that bear my family's name. But now, like exiles on our own land, we live haunted by the old ways, like the Indians who were driven out when first my people came. But these mountains know more than they tell. Yes, and more than you or I ever will. There's magic hiding underneath the country windowsill. There are voices in the hills. The old ways were full of hardships. The winters were cold and lonely, but they knew where they belonged in a world you could understand. But then the cities closed in on us, and the choices looked too easy. Go broke from paying taxes or get rich from selling land. But these mountains know more than they tell, and more than you or I ever will. There's magic hiding underneath the country windowsill, and there are voices in the hills. Now my children will grow up like children of the city, living in the country, but strangers to the land. See how their pleasures come in packages of styrofoam and fiberglass, using as a mantelpiece wood tools once made by hand. And now the children of the city come here looking for the good life of a picture card New England of a long forgotten day. And me, I know the dream they're looking for. Believe me, no one loves it more than he who held it in his hands and watched it fade away. These mountains know more than they tell, and more than you or I ever will. There's magic hiding underneath the country windowsill, and there are voices in the hills. My people have been farming here 7 generations. Now my brother Wayne's the only one who's farming still, and there are voices in the hills. I mentioned that for all my poetic pretensions, I made my living doing gigs. One of them was at the Base Lodge at Pico, and those were guys who were, you know, they were skiers. They were into skiing. They weren't into poetry and stuff. I had done an interview with the Rutland Herald, and they asked specifically about that song, and I said, well, it's a metaphor. It's about, you know, ghosts, sort of. And so, but you know, it does feel. I feel like Vermont has a spirit, you know, and it's a metaphor. The voices. But you know, one time I was hiking, and I had stopped for a break, and the brook that I stopped by upstream was gurgling and babbling, and I actually mistook it for the voices of little girls on a hike. I thought of like a Girl Scout troop was about to go, and then I realized it was the brook. Well, the story in the Rutland Herald was Dick McCormack walks in the woods and the voices talk to him. And he writes songs about them. Well, of course, I come into Pico the next day and all the lift operators are going, Dick! Yeah. Well, that song has a verse which says the children of the city come here looking for the good life of Picture Guard, New England. And said, no one loves it more than me who watched it fade away. I realized when I wrote that I was writing about myself. That I was one of those people coming from away. I was not part of the hippie invasion. Like I said, I was coming to where I knew I was going to live all my life. But go broke from paying taxes or get rich from selling land. People who moved in from out of state brought out of state money and jacked up the real estate values. And I've got neighbors who are millionaires if they sell the land. So the hippie invasion. My friend Yvonne Daly wrote a story about the hippie invasion. A book, rather, about the hippie invasion. And I'm in it. And there's a picture of me taken when I was like 26 years old. And I didn't think I was handsome at the time, but I look at it now. And what was interesting is I am an old man, but I'm not so old as to be indifferent to feminine admiration. And I definitely enjoyed how many of my women friends said, compliment on what a handsome guy I was in that. The word hot showed up. and so I kind of enjoyed that, you know, that I was, except I began to realize that any woman who told me how hot I looked sounded surprised. So, who knew? My God. Being an old man's in there. I started calling myself an old man when I was 50. I sort of tongue-in-cheek. You know, I'd want a glass of water and I didn't want to get up. I'd say to one of my sons, get me a glass of water, would you? I'd get it myself, but I'm an old man. You know? But now I'm 78, and that's an old man. That's a genuine old man. I find that there are certain things that linger from being a young man into being an old man. I am an old man, but I still have enough testosterone in me. Well, I already mentioned I like women's admiration, but I have enough testosterone in me that I am competitive. And now when a friend of mine, when I visit a friend in a nursing home, or a friend of mine, you know, dies, there's the part of me that says, I win! I remember Sunday dinners Mother cooked when Daddy read to us kids from the good book. Back in the good old days, the good old country life. Black and white TV and Barney Fife. We always thought that things would stay the same till the summer of love, when things got strange. A tribe of hippies bought the old farm round the bend. They renamed the place the Cosmic Living Inn. They're a bunch of left-wing commies, Daddy claimed. Everything changed the year the hippies came. They bought their land from the estate of Farmer Brown, the most right-wing fanatic in our town. And against the counterculture he had raised, now at night you could hear him spinning in his grave. Mama looked at Daddy in great fright as I hung around that commune day and night, because swimming naked looked like fun to me. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll and being free. Pick it, boy. Yes, friends, it is only one guitar. My daddy rose at dawn to milk the herd as I come trucking home looking absurd, with love beads and patches on my ass, and like the cows a great fondness for grass. Daddy played a fiddle and mouth harp, Mama sang in a mountain tenor part. But old country songs are sure a lot more fun with tambourine, sitar, and conga drum. My mama's good home cooking was a treat. Those brownies that she baked were dark and sweet. The hippies' brownies didn't taste as good, yeah, but they had effects that mamas never could. Hippie chicks thought country boys were cute. Their philosophy was, if it feels good, do it. They had no bras and such alluring charms. and Mama hated the hair beneath their arm. I dearly loved the hippie commune down the road, the summer love that made my mind explode. I grew my hair and Mama was ashamed. Everything changed the year the hippies came. That's the end of the song. Here comes the epilogue. This story ended many long years ago. That old commune's gone where all good communes go. The last remaining hippie has no hair and just became town Republican chair. My .com is organic living and we market goat cheese, me and my wife Jen. We donate 10% to human rights and we attend a 12-step program Thursday nights. But I still recall the summer of love when things got strange, everything changed. The year the hippies came. You shouldn't explain your jokes. But there's a joke buried in that no one has ever noticed, and I thought it was very funny, which is, we market goat cheese, me and my wife, Jen. This is about a boy, a Vermont boy, right? Circa 1970. His wife is named Jen. What I had in mind is that he married one of the kids from the commune, where every girl was named Jennifer. That was the joke. Donovan's Jennifer. Every one of my friends has a Jennifer daughter. So. When I first moved to Vermont from New York, I just had to apply for a passport. I had allowed my passport to expire. And so I got a new birth certificate, which I had lost. New York City birth. I found out I was born on East 58th Street, Manhattan. That's like almost Sutton Place. I think it's because my father was in the Union, and it's where his hospital was. But anyway, this is, when I moved full-time to Vermont, I rented from a guy who was a friend of my grandfather's. So when I was 22 years old, this guy was 86. And part of the deal was I had to pay my rent in person, because he knew I had just graduated college. He was bedridden with arthritis. He was an English professor. He was a world traveler. He had been an Episcopal missionary. I didn't know there were such things. He was an Episcopal missionary in Japan and in China. Japan under the warlords, in China during the Revolution. Interesting guy. Born and raised in Bethel, Vermont. And Bob Bundy told me that in the early 20th century, the rate of mental illness and suicide was especially high among rural Vermont women. And what it was he said the kids all went to school. They had each other. The men went downtown looking for work. Even guys with no job, they'd hang around a pool hall because the farmers would go to the pool hall when they needed a day labor. And they would try to get work. They at least had each other's company. That the rural women, the farm wives, were alone. And he told me a story about that. the air grows damp this time of night. Here's to you, kind gentlemen, a song then while we await the light. Here's to all God's children. And it's sad with wine, my tale I sing. Here's to you, kind gentlemen, as the river thaws each spring. Here's to all God's children. In the hills by the borderline, here's to you, kind gentlemen, 40 below in the winter time. Here's to all God's children. I worked at the mill there, you may recall. Here's to you, kind gentlemen, I was laid off in the early fall. Here's to all God's children. Oh, the children were too young to understand. Here's to you, kind gentlemen, and I was consoled by the idle band. Here's to all God's children. But it crushed my wife, so quiet and kind. Here's to you, kind gentlemen, already old before her time. Here's to all God's children. Oh, at first they said she shows the strain. Here's to you, kind gentlemen. Then they said she was insane. Here's to all God's children. Perhaps her voice made us realize. Here's to you, kind gentlemen, or the look of weariness in her eyes. Here's to all God's children. I awoke and the house was cold inside. Here's to you, kind gentlemen. The kitchen door was open wide. Here's to all God's children. I followed her footprints in the snow. Here's to you, kind gentlemen. I shivered at the tale they told. Here's to all God's children. For 10 long days and 10 longer nights. Here's to you, kind gentlemen. We searched beneath the silent ice. Here's to all God's children. It was just her soul we hoped to save. Here's to you, kind gentlemen, to bury her in a Christian grave. Here's to all God's children. And it's sad with the wine, my tale I sing. Here's to you, kind gentlemen, as the river thaws each spring. Here's to all God's children. wrote that about this time of year. Bob Bundy also said something to me. Just one line with which this song ends. And I'll just leave it at that. This is the shortest song in the concert, by the way. It had 3 verses. I realized that everything I wanted to say is in the first verse. It's called Stone Walls. Perhaps he saw with different eyes times of death and birth. He surely saw with different eyes what his time was worth. Perhaps he never saw a choice of how to spend his time, but he surely gathered stones and just as surely made them rhyme. Perhaps it's just a gift of chance. His work has yet to fall, but it stood right here these 100 years that did not love a wall. Perhaps he did it for a dream, more likely just for gain, more perhaps, less perhaps, but he did it just the same. He looked westward to the hills from the lowlands of New Hampshire. He did what a man with a hungry feeling does. We don't know the name of the man who built this stone wall, but I do believe we know what kind of man he was.